In an age when Europe was tearing itself apart, a terrifying truth echoed across the shattered kingdoms. Whoever ruled the oceans would rule the world. The seas were a chaotic battleground, a swirling vortex of ambition and bloodshed. For Britain, an island nation staring into the abyss of invasion and irrelevance, the choice was simple: dominate the waves or be swallowed by them. Out of this desperation, an idea was forged in fire and fear to build a navy so powerful, so utterly dominant, that the world had never seen its equal. This wasn't just about ships, it was about forging a weapon to conquer the planet. The birth of this legendary force was anything but glorious. Imagine shipyards shrouded in a perpetual haze of sawdust and smoke, the air thick with the smell of burning timber, tar, and human sweat. Here, men toiled in conditions that were nothing short of hell on earth. They worked with their bare hands, their bodies battered and broken, hauling massive timbers, and hammering iron under a relentless sun. The relentless clang of metal against metal was the grim soundtrack to their lives. Accidents were common and brutal. A slip of the hand, a falling beam, and a life was snuffed out. Many souls perished before their creations ever tasted salt water. This was the brutal, bloody genesis of the Royal Navy, a desperate gamble for survival, built on the backs of forgotten men. Once a ship set sail, the shipyard horrors were replaced by the cold, indifferent cruelty of the ocean. These wooden fortresses were at the mercy of nature's fury. Imagine monstrous waves, as tall as mountains, crashing over the decks, threatening to splinter the hull and drag everyone into the abyss. Storms would appear without warning, tearing sails to ribbons and snapping masts like twigs. Below deck, life was a slow-motion nightmare. Food rotted, water turned foul, and the darkness spread disease. Scurvy would rot a man from the inside out, his teeth falling from his gums. The psychological toll was immense. Confined in cramped, suffocating quarters for months, even years on end, tensions boiled over. Mutiny was a constant, whispered threat, a shadow lurking in every corner of the ship. And there was one horrifying unwritten rule of the sea: a man who falls overboard is a man who is already dead. The ship would not, could not, turn back. He was left to the sharks and the endless, unforgiving blue. This was the price of service, a daily struggle against death itself. But the ocean's fury wasn't the only monster lurking in the deep. The seas were infested with predators of a different kind. Ruthless pirates and enemy privators. These weren't the romantic adventurers of fiction. They were savage hunters who lived by the blade and the gun. For a Royal Navy sailor, spotting a pirate flag on the horizon was a death sentence. To be captured meant a fate far worse than a quick death in battle. It meant torture, starvation, and being sold into slavery or left to rot on some desolate island. The stories of pirate cruelty were whispered from ship to ship, tales of unspeakable acts designed to spread terror. Faced with this nightmare, Britain made a decision. It would not just fight the pirates, it would hunt them. It would unleash a campaign of such calculated brutality that the very idea of piracy would become synonymous with a swift and bloody end. The Royal Navy was about to become the hunter, and the seas would run red. To command these floating coffins and hunt these sea wolves, a new breed of leader was required. These were not noble gentlemen playing at war. They were iron-willed commanders, men forged in the crucible of naval combat, whose hearts seemed to be made of stone and seawater. They were relentless, ruthless, and utterly unbreakable. These captains demanded absolute obedience and drove their crews to the very edge of human endurance, and then pushed them further. For them, surrender was not an option. A commander would rather light the gunpowder stores and send his own ship, his own crew, and himself to the bottom of the ocean than hand it over to the enemy. Their tactics were as bold as they were terrifying. They'd sail directly into the heart of a storm to escape a superior foe, or use the fog as a cloak to ambush an entire fleet. Their names became legends of terror whispered in every port. From the Caribbean to the Indian Ocean, they were the bold men who would turn the Royal Navy into a weapon of global domination. The age of sail warfare was an orchestra of destruction, and its symphony was the roar of cannons. Picture two massive wooden ships, side by side, so close you could see the terror in the enemy's eyes. Then, the world explodes. A broadside unleashes a hurricane of iron, a storm of cannonballs weighing up to 32 pounds each. They don't just punch holes, they obliterate. The sound is deafening, a physical blow that shakes the very soul, wood splinters into 1,000 daggers, flying through the air and tearing men apart. The deck becomes a slaughterhouse, slippery with blood and littered with the dead and dying. The air, thick with acrid black smoke, chokes the lungs and blinds the eyes. In this chaos, the Royal Navy perfected its gunnery. They trained their crews to fire faster, more accurately than anyone else. They developed terrifying new tactics, like firing chainshot to shred enemy sails, and rigging, or grapeshot that turned cannons into giant shotguns, mowing down entire crews in a single, horrific blast. Enemies learned to fear the thunderous rhythm of a British broadside. It was the sound of their world ending. The Royal Navy didn't just master brute force, it mastered the art of fear. They developed a strategy that haunted the nightmares of their enemies, the Ghost Fleet. Under the command of their most audacious captains, British ships would use the cover of night, fog, and storms to their advantage. They would glide silently out of the mist, appearing like spectral apparitions right next to an unsuspecting enemy vessel. Before the enemy crew could even sound the alarm, a devastating broadside would erupt from the darkness, turning their ship into a floating wreck. The British would then vanish back into the fog as quickly as they appeared, leaving behind chaos, fire, and death. This psychological warfare was devastatingly effective. Superstitious sailors from Spain and France began to believe the British ships were cursed, crewed by demons and commanded by sorcerers. Fear spread across the Atlantic like a plague. The mere possibility of encountering these ghost ships was enough to shatter the morale of an entire fleet before a single shot was fired. The culmination of this brutal evolution was the utter annihilation of Britain's rivals. The mighty Spanish Armada, once the terror of the seas, was broken and scattered. The proud French fleets, again and again, were smashed into splinters at battles like Trafalgar. The Dutch, formidable merchants and fighters, saw their naval power systematically dismantled. The oceans of the world echoed with the death screams of empires. The waves were littered with the corpses of ships, their shattered masts looking like skeletal fingers reaching from a watery grave. A new and terrifying reality began to dawn on the world. There was no one left to challenge the Royal Navy. They were the undisputed masters of the sea. Any nation that dared to build a fleet knew it would eventually have to face the British, a battle they could not win. The message was clear. The oceans belonged to Britain. This absolute dominance ushered in Britain's golden era. With the seas under their complete control, British ships sailed wherever they pleased. They controlled the world's most vital trade routes, connecting their rapidly expanding empire. Gold, spices, cotton, tether, wealth of the world flowed into Britain. Protected by the wooden walls of the Royal Navy, a single British naval ensign appearing on the horizon was enough to make enemy warships turn and flee. The Navy became the very backbone of an empire on which the sun never set, a global police force that projected British power to the furthest corners of the earth. From a desperate island nation, Britain had transformed into a global superpower, all because it had conquered the sea. The Royal Navy wasn't just a fleet, it was the key that had unlocked the world. Today, the age of sail is long gone, but the legacy of these men endures. The stories of their brutal journey, of the blood, sweat, and fear, still echo across the pages of history. The sea itself seems to remember them, the iron-willed captains, and the forgotten sailors who faced down storms, monsters, and empires. They built a legend that will never fade, a testament to what humans can achieve when pushed to the absolute limit. They weren't just sailors, fighting for king and country. They were something more. They were the warriors of the waves,